You ever have one of those moments where your whole life shifts on a dime? Not with fireworks or crashing thunder. No, I mean the quiet, surgical kind. The kind that slices through your gut with the same sterile chill as hospital air. That was me, standing there in room 302 of St. Luke's Medical Center, watching my wife cradle a baby that might not be mine. It was a beautiful baby. I'll give her that. Pink blanket, little tuft of jet black hair, and lungs that could already command a room. My mother, Linda, stood on one side of Kristen's bed, beaming like this was the second coming. On the other side was Dolores, Kristen's mother, squeezing her daughter's hand like they'd just finished a marathon together. And me? I kept my distance. I stood like a bouncer at the edge of a nightclub, ready to eject someone. I just hadn't decided who yet. The nurse came in with that clipboard. You know the one. The one that makes everything official. Mr. Davis, I need you to fill out the birth certificate, she said, all sweetness and scrubs. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. We'll fill it out, I replied. After the DNA test proves if I'm the father. You'd think I'd fired a shotgun in that room. Kristen's head snapped around so fast, she nearly dropped the baby. Dolores gasped so hard I thought we'd need another nurse. My mother stiffened beside her like someone had just insulted the Marines. Kristen, to her credit, tried the old righteous indignation act. How dare you, Martin, she hissed, her voice rising. Are you accusing me of cheating? I met her stare. Calm. I'd been rehearsing this scene in my mind for months. No, I said. I'm sure you cheated. I'm just not sure whose baby you're holding. Dolores reached out, trying to play the peacekeeper. Martin, this is not the right time, she whispered like we were backstage at a funeral. Your words could trigger postpartum depression. Think about the baby. That's when my mother exploded. You should be ashamed, she snapped at me. Accusing your wife. Here, of all places. She just gave birth. I stood still. I let their words bounce off like hail on a windshield. And then I pulled out the folded piece of paper from my jacket pocket. Kristen, I said, should I call your lover Marshall Jones? She flinched. Hard. Like I'd reached in and unplugged her spine. What? I unfolded the paper slowly. The kind of slow you reserve for legal evidence or a magic trick. My husband should never know about you and me. I don't want anything to do with you. I read. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted. He sent me that screenshot. I added. Right after you ghosted him. Her hands were shaking now. Tears forming, lower lip trembling. She clutched the baby tighter, as if she thought it could shield her from what was coming. And then came the whisper. The worst confession in the quietest voice. He said, no one would ever know. Boom. There it was. The truth, laid out in soft sobs and hormonal regret. That's when Linda, my mother, tried to intervene again. Bless her misguided heart. Martin, stop. This isn't proven. What if the baby is yours? I didn't yell. I didn't throw a tantrum. I'm not that guy. I took a breath, the kind you take before cutting a wire on a ticking bomb. I've known about her cheating for 4 months, I said plainly. I waited for this baby to be born so I could take the test. And now, I wait for the truth. Kristen's eyes were like shattered glass. Dolores clutched her own chest, the reality dawning in her posture. I turned to them both and added, if the baby's mine, I'll be his father. If not, I'm done. The silence that followed was biblical. And then, I dropped the bomb that cracked the foundation of that sterile little hospital room. As for this woman, I said, tilting my head toward Kristen, I'm done. She will no longer be my wife. That was the moment. That was the first domino. But trust me, it was just the beginning. The morning after the hospital showdown, I woke up to the silence of a house that no longer felt like home. The baby wasn't crying down the hall. Kristen wasn't downstairs microwaving oatmeal and humming off key to Adele. It was just me, black coffee, and my mother's old Labrador drooling at my feet. And honestly, I'd never felt so peaceful. I didn't go to work. I called in and told them I needed a few personal days. My boss, Frank, asked if everything was all right. I told him, I just found out my wife is starring in her own version of Maury, the Betrayal edition. So, yeah, I need a minute. He didn't ask for details. I spent the morning going through our joint accounts. Emphasis on the word joint, because in less than an hour, they weren't. Canceled the cards, froze the savings, transferred what was mine, and locked it down tighter than a doomsday bunker. I even changed the Amazon password. Let her explain that to her new baby daddy when the Prime diapers stop arriving. And then, Because karma deserves a sidekick, I went to my lawyer's office. Now, I didn't just pick any old shark from Google. No, I went straight to Ron Dufresne. The man looks like someone who could sue you into bankruptcy while eating a Reuben sandwich and not dropping a shred of lettuce. I told him the story. He didn't blink. Cheated while pregnant, he said, jotting notes like he was writing a thriller. With a guy named Marshall Jones? Sounds like a porn star, but I'll work with it. Ron was thrilled. Adultery cases were like birthday cake to him. He outlined the strategy: file for divorce under infidelity, push for no alimony due to fault, and request a court-mandated DNA test. I nodded. It was like watching a well-oiled machine of vengeance hum to life. As we wrapped up, he paused and asked, "You want to go nuclear? Or just deep impact?" I sipped the mediocre office coffee, then smiled. "Ron, I don't want her hurt. I want her documented. I want a legal paper trail, so deep Indiana Jones would need a torch to get through it." He laughed. Noted. That afternoon, my mother called again. Apparently, she had decided to stay at Dolores's place to support the child. I told her, great. Maybe bring some crayons so the kid can draw a Who's My Daddy coloring book. She didn't laugh. That woman's loyalty to Kristen was either admirable or clinically delusional. Kristen hadn't contacted me yet. No calls, no texts. Maybe she was smart enough to realize there was nothing left to salvage. Or maybe she was busy convincing herself that somehow I would come around. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even bitter. I was just done. There's a difference. That night, I poured myself a whiskey and stared out at the backyard. The garden I planted last spring was overrun with weeds. Seemed fitting. Then the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Marshall Jones. Tall, athletic, the kind of guy who probably thinks philosophy means gym selfies and protein shakes. He was holding a small box. His face was pale. His hands trembled slightly. Martin, he said. I didn't know where else to go. I raised an eyebrow. You could have started with not my front porch. That's usually a solid plan A. He swallowed. Look, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Kristen told me she was in a bad marriage. That you didn't care about her. I didn't say a word. Just stared at him like I was reading the nutritional facts on a bad decision. She told me, he continued, that you were cold. That you didn't talk. That you were never home. She said she was lonely. Did she also tell you we were married? I asked flatly. He looked away. I'm not here to fight, he said quickly. I'm here to give you this. He handed me the box. Inside was a USB drive and a note. I saved our texts, he said. All of them. Just in case. I stared at the box, then back at him. You brought me receipts? He nodded. I just thought you deserved the truth. I took the box, still unsure if I was dealing with a repentant man or an idiot with a conscience. Go home, Marshall, I said. And next time you fall in love, maybe try a woman whose husband doesn't own a shotgun. He didn't argue. When he left, I sat down, plugged in the USB, and started reading. Hundreds of messages. Late-night sexts. Conversations about me. Unflattering, but also laughably untrue. Plans to leave me. Panic about the baby. Denials. More lies. Then the last message. Kristen, I think Martin suspects something. I'm going to tell him it's his. Well, at least she was honest in her dishonesty. I closed the laptop and poured another whiskey. This time, I toasted the USB drive. To evidence, I muttered. The only thing in this marriage that didn't cheat on me. The real game hadn't even started yet. But now I had ammunition. Now, I had clarity. And God help anyone who thought I was going to play nice. Kristen was served Friday morning. The process server handed her the divorce papers on her mother's porch, smiled, and walked off like it was just another Amazon delivery. That day, she called me 3 times. Her voicemails ranged from weepy to manipulative, classic Kristen. She insisted Marshall meant nothing, claimed the baby had my eyes, and begged me to think about the family. I didn't return her calls. Instead, I focused on what mattered: preparation. Ron Dufresne, my lawyer, was already in motion. He filed for divorce citing infidelity, attached the DNA test, and requested a financial freeze. He told me, "We'll make sure she walks away with exactly what she deserves," which is nothing. Then came the real twist. Ron subpoenaed Marshall. Kristen had no idea. Tuesday morning, we arrived at the courthouse. I wore my charcoal suit. Kristen showed up in an ironic white dress and brought her newly minted, nervous-looking attorney. Ron, on the other hand, strolled in like he owned the place. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense, opened the hearing. Ron stood up first. Your Honor, this case involves willful deception, marital infidelity, and an attempt to fraudulently assign paternity. We'd like to introduce Exhibit A. DNA results showing Mr. Davis is not the father. Kristen's lawyer immediately objected to the language. The judge waved it off. Ron wasn't done. We also have Exhibit B, screenshots of messages between Mrs. Davis and her lover, Marshall Jones, including a confession to misleading my client about paternity. The judge looked intrigued. Continue. That's when Marshall entered the room. Kristen froze. Her expression said it all. She didn't see this coming. Marshall looked like a deer in headlights, but followed through. Ron asked, "Did you engage in a relationship with Mrs. Davis during her marriage?" Marshall nodded. "Yes." "Did she tell you the child might be yours?" "Yes." "Did she plan to deceive Mr. Davis?" Marshall hesitated, then admitted. "She said it was easier to tell him it was his." Ron presented the text. "I'll tell him it's his. It's easier that way." Kristen's lawyer looked ready to melt into her seat. The judge called for a recess. After lunch, Kristen's side requested mediation. Ron and I agreed, on our terms. No alimony. No asset sharing. No contact. Kristen could keep the baby, her last name, and her delusions. But not my money. Not my time. Not my future. Outside the courthouse, Kristen stood alone with the baby. Marshall was long gone. Her mother didn't show. She looked at me like I owed her something. An apology, maybe. A second chance. All I gave her was a nod of closure. That chapter was over, and I was ready to write the next one. 3 weeks after the court hearing, just when I thought life might finally begin to dull into the boring routine of healing, I ran into her again, Angela. The nurse from that delivery room. The one who heard every word when I dropped the DNA bomb in front of Kristen, Dolores, and my mother. I was picking up a prescription at the pharmacy when I heard someone say, "Mr. Davis?" I turned. There she was in jeans and a polo, her hospital badge clipped to her purse. Angela. Red hair, sharp green eyes, and that same steady expression I remembered from the hospital. "I just wanted to say," she hesitated, "what you did in that room took guts." I raised an eyebrow. "That's one word for it." She chuckled. "I've seen a lot of fathers sign birth certificates when they know damn well something's off. You stood your ground." I gave a small nod. Truth doesn't always feel good, but it ages well. She smiled, then paused. "Can I buy you a coffee sometime?" I was caught off guard. That an official hospital follow-up? "No," she said, amused. "That's me, a woman who's seen too many broken men, trying to meet one who didn't crumble." 2 days later, we had that coffee. It wasn't a date. Just two adults sitting across from each other, talking about life, medicine, betrayal, and the absurdity of people lying about DNA in the age of 24-hour test kits. Angela wasn't trying to fill any void in my life. She wasn't offering sympathy either. Just clarity and humor. "You know," she said, stirring her latte, "when your wife started screaming in that delivery room, the other nurses thought we were filming a drama pilot." "Did you film it?" "Of course not," she said. "But I might have taken mental notes for a novel someday." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. By our second coffee, she asked, "What's next for you?" That question stayed with me. I had the house, the accounts, the peace, but I didn't have a direction. That's when I started cleaning out the garage. It had been Kristen's storage hellscape. Boxes of memories I didn't want and forgotten furniture she said we'd refurbish together someday. That day never came. Among the junk, I found a shoebox. Inside, old letters, college love notes, photos, and something strange, a set of keys and a note with the name Taylor M. Safe deposit box number 14, Riverbank Credit Union. Taylor M.? I didn't recognize the name. But Kristen's handwriting was unmistakable. I stared at that note for hours. Could have been nothing. Could have been everything. Angela, of course, had thoughts. "You find a woman's secrets in 2 places," she told me. Her diary, and the things she hides from her diary. The next morning, I went to Riverbank Credit Union. I handed the note to the clerk, who confirmed the box was registered under Kristen's maiden name. With ID and my lawyer's power of attorney, I accessed it. Inside, a burner phone, 3 passports, cash, neatly wrapped bundles of $100 bills, and 1 photo, Kristen, with Marshall, and a third man. The back of the photo said, for Barcelona. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a love triangle. This was a plan. A long one. And I was never supposed to find out. You'd think finding a photo labeled for Barcelona with a burner phone and passports would trigger rage, heartbreak, or at least a good old-fashioned bottle of whiskey. Me? I made tea, sat on the couch, played Vivaldi. I was done reacting like a fool. Now, I was going to act like a strategist. The photo was grainy. Kristen, Marshall, and a third man, younger than me, with a ratty beard and surfer hair. Behind them, a whiteboard. Words written in Spanish. Salida segura and plan final. Safe exit. Final plan. And just like that, the woman I married turned from adulteress into conspirator. I called Ron. You ever dig into offshore accounts? I asked. His pause was telling. What did you find, Martin? I sent him the photo, the bank location, and a photo of the contents. Within 24 hours, he had a name for the third man, Jared Montoya. Dual citizenship. Freelance consultant. And, here's the kicker, a federal fraud suspect from a case that went cold 2 years ago. Kristen, it seemed, wasn't just cheating on me. She was part of something bigger. Maybe she didn't know what she'd signed up for. Or maybe she did. Either way, I wasn't going to sit and wonder. I needed answers. Angela wasn't surprised. Your wife has the vibe, she said. Not just of someone who cheats. Of someone who thinks they're smarter than everyone in the room. I didn't argue. Instead, I flew to Barcelona. Before you gasp, no, I didn't tell anyone, not even Angela. I needed to do this without eyes on me. The moment I landed, I went to the address I found in a note wedged into the burner phone's case. It was written in shorthand, EL4. Raminit. Box 5. Turns out, Raminit wasn't a building. It was a cafe. And Box 5? A post office box behind it, hidden inside a wall of antique lockers. Inside Box 5 was another envelope. This one had Kristen's handwriting too. It said, if anything happens to me, tell Taylor I'm sorry. Taylor M. The same name from the shoebox. Only this time, I had the full name, Taylor Montgomery. I didn't know a Taylor, but I knew who would. When I returned to the States, I confronted Dolores. She cracked faster than an egg on a frying pan. Taylor was her backup plan, she admitted. They met years ago. He was supposed to help her disappear if the Marshall thing fell apart. Barcelona was never about escaping you. It was about escaping him. I stared at her. So this wasn't just betrayal. It was a heist. Dolores looked down. It started as an affair. Then it became survival. The pieces snapped into place. Kristen never planned to stay with Marshall. She planned to use him. Just like she used me. But the best part? She left a trail. And I was going to follow it. Not out of revenge. Out of principle. Because if you try to destroy a man's life and fail, you'd better pray he never finds his footing again. And I had just started running. By now, I'd gone from betrayed husband to amateur investigator. My attorney was tracking financial records. Angela was combing medical data for birth records tied to Marshall. And I was dialing a number I never thought I'd call, Taylor Montgomery. I found him the modern way, Venmo, of all places. His transactions were public. A few odd entries popped up, laundry, silent retainer, and one marked KM gift-wrapped gift, 2 years ago. I messaged him. Simple and direct. Taylor, we need to talk. It's about Kristen. He replied in 7 minutes. Where? We met in a dim bar halfway between his city and mine. Taylor walked in wearing a battered jacket, a wary expression, and that ratty beard from the photo. But up close, I saw something else in his eyes, not arrogance. Guilt. I figured you'd come, he said, sliding into the booth. You always look like a guy who'd ask the right questions eventually. I didn't reply. He took a deep breath. Kristen was complicated. What did she tell you about me? Nothing. Just your name. And that she's sorry. His jaw clenched. That sounds about right. Then he started talking. Kristen met Taylor during a company retreat 6 years ago. He wasn't a colleague. He was a guest speaker on financial security. She latched onto him like a tick. At first, he thought she was just charming, curious, a bit intense. Then she pitched an idea. She said she wanted out, he explained. Out of her marriage, her life, everything. She wanted to fake an identity and move to Europe. I thought she was bluffing. She wasn't. Kristen forged documents, opened fake accounts, and used my income, my good name, to launder her fantasy. Taylor said he backed out when she started using real money from our accounts. Said he felt it was going too far. But by then, he muttered, I was already complicit. He didn't help her run. She ghosted him. She used me, then disappeared, he said bitterly. The Barcelona plan? That was hers. All of it. Marshall, I realized, was a distraction. Taylor was the architect. Kristen was the engine. She told me you were dangerous, he added. That you were controlling, emotionally abusive. I laughed. Let me guess. You believed her. He nodded once. I was an idiot. That, at least, we could agree on. I left the bar that night knowing the full scope. Kristen wasn't just a cheater. She was a manipulator, a fraud, a fantasist. She used every man around her as a rung on a ladder she never planned to stop climbing. But ladders go both ways. And now, I had enough evidence to yank it out from under her. Back home, Angela was waiting. She'd cooked dinner, poured 2 glasses of wine, and set her expression somewhere between curiosity and concern. Well, she asked. What did he say? I sat down. He told the truth. Every last disgusting inch of it. She leaned forward. So what happens now? I smiled. Now? I burn every bridge she built. And this time, I'd light the match myself. By the time I finished dismantling Kristen's network, I had 3 folders: financials, legal, and collateral damage. I labeled them like case files, because that's what it was now. A takedown. And I wasn't improvising anymore. I started with the financials. Thanks to Taylor's confession and Ron's late-night email sleuthing, we traced the laundering trail through 3 shell companies Kristen had opened using old addresses and fake names. Names she'd borrowed from my side of the family. Cute. One LLC was tied to a bogus interior design consultancy. Another was listed as KM Advisory. The third, a tutoring service. Kristen was nothing if not creative in her deceit. I forwarded everything to the IRS. Next, legal. Ron filed a motion to request restitution, citing marital fraud and identity misuse. The judge who'd handled our divorce took interest. Apparently, cases like ours rarely show up with such a well-packaged dossier. She reopened the financial settlement. Kristen's lawyer tried to object. The judge overruled her before she got the full sentence out. Kristen was served again, this time at a local co-working space, where she'd been reinventing herself as a parenting influencer. I guess even a woman with 3 fake passports eventually needs Wi-Fi and iced coffee. The final part? Collateral damage. I debated this one. I really did. But then I remembered the look on Dolores' face when she tried to guilt me into doing the right thing for a baby that wasn't mine. I remembered how she knew about the Barcelona plan and kept it hidden. So, I sent a full report to her HOA. Turns out, Dolores had been leasing part of her home under the table to a tenant, Marshall, and the HOA was very strict about violations. When they reviewed the visitor logs and lease evidence Ron's PI provided, they fined her $10,000 and revoked her voting rights for 5 years. Small wins, but they added up. Angela watched this unfold with quiet, unnerving calm. She didn't judge, didn't applaud either. She just made sure I ate something and slept like a human. You're good at this, she said one night. At what? War. I looked at her over my drink. I didn't start this. I just learned to win it. Kristen tried contacting me again, this time through a burner number. Kristen, we need to talk. This is out of control. I replied once. Me? Out of control was when you faked a new life behind your husband's back. This is just the invoice. I blocked her. A week later, Ron called. The court approved our motion. Kristen owed restitution. Not jail. Yet, but thousands in penalties and possible federal charges pending IRS review. You want to push for jail time? Ron asked. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, not yet. Because there was still one folder left unopened. The one I hadn't labeled. The one with a name I hadn't dared speak aloud yet. And once I did, everything would change again. I was reorganizing the mess Kristen left behind. Old boxes, files, that cursed shoebox, when I noticed a second photograph stuck beneath the first. It was the same Barcelona shot. Only this time, cropped differently. And there, standing off to the side in the reflection of a glass window, was someone I knew. Not from Kristen's world. From mine. Uncle Ray. Now, Ray wasn't my blood uncle. He was my father's closest friend. Grew up with him in Detroit. After Dad died, Ray stayed in touch, checked in on birthdays, sent Christmas cards. He was a familiar shadow. Reliable. Quiet. The photo changed everything. I dug through old emails. Found a thread from last Christmas. Ray had sent Kristen a separate message, thanking her for the referral to a client in Spain. Referral? Spain. I called Ron. Dig into Ray Thompson, I said. Quietly. 3 days later, Ron called back. You're not going to like this, he warned. Ray was tied to 2 of the shell companies Kristen used. Not directly, but he was listed as a guarantor on a European business registration in Madrid. The same address Taylor gave me for Kristen's offshore plan. Ray had helped her build the escape hatch. Angela sat beside me as I stared at the screen. He's family, I muttered. She shook her head. No, he just played the part long enough for you to believe it. I drove to Ray's house that night. He lived 2 towns over, quiet place, dogwood trees and a mailbox with the Thompsons in cursive. When he opened the door, his smile froze halfway. Michael, he said slowly. Didn't expect you. I know, I said. But then again, I didn't expect to see you in Barcelona. He stiffened. We talked on the porch. I gave him a chance to explain. He didn't deny it. She told me you were abusive, he said. Manipulative. Controlling. I laughed. And you just believed her? Or were you looking for an excuse? Ray looked away. I never intended to hurt you. No, I said. You just helped someone else do it. He apologized. Repeatedly. Said Kristen used him, too. Claimed he didn't know the full extent. It didn't matter. The damage was done. Before I left, I handed him a copy of the court order, restitution notice, IRS involvement, all of it. I made sure he knew that if he so much as signed a receipt for her ever again, he'd go down with her. Then I drove home. Angela didn't ask questions that night. She just poured me a drink, sat beside me, and let the silence breathe. Kristen had lied, cheated, schemed. But Ray? He was the betrayal that felt coldest. Because love from a partner, you can lose. You expect it. But loyalty from the man who helped raise you? That should have been bulletproof. Now I knew. Kristen never worked alone. And I wasn't just a victim of her betrayal. I was surrounded by ghosts in my own house. It took me 3 months to arrange the meeting. Not because Kristen was hard to find. She wasn't. She was still in the city, living in a modest apartment paid for by Marshall's dwindling generosity. No, it took time because I wanted every card stacked against her before I walked into the room. I booked the conference space at my attorney's office. Neutral ground. Public, but private enough for what had to be said. Angela didn't come. This wasn't her war. She just left a note on my desk that morning. Don't forget who you are. I didn't. Kristen walked in 5 minutes late, like always. She wore neutral colors, minimal makeup, and a fake expression of calm that cracked the second she saw the folder in my hand. You didn't need to do all this, she said. I did, I replied. Because you didn't just lie. You built a house of cards using my life as the foundation. She sat down, arms folded. I opened the folder and spread out 3 documents. The DNA test, the forensic audit summary, and the business registration tying her to Ray and Taylor. Kristen looked at each one like a bad tarot reading. This isn't necessary, she repeated, her voice quieter now. We're already divorced. It's not about the marriage anymore, I said. It's about the truth. I watched her facade unravel. First came the deflection. I was scared. You were always so distant. Stop, I cut in. You don't get to write the script anymore. Then came the tears. They promised me a way out, she whispered. Marshall, Taylor, even Ray. And you took it. Willingly. She nodded, eyes glassy. Yes. Silence stretched. No lies left. No excuses. Just the truth between us like a steel wall. I loved you once, she said finally. I just stopped. I nodded. I know. That was the end of it. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted freedom. And I'd earned it, every painful step. She reached for the documents. Can I? No, I said, pulling them back. They're for the court. And the IRS. Her mouth twitched. You're really going through with it? I already did. I stood up. The meeting was over. As I reached the door, she called out, Do you hate me? I paused. No, I said. I don't hate you. But I'll never forget who you are. And then I walked out. Back into the light. Some endings aren't fireworks or explosions. They don't come with slammed doors, shouted curses, or courtroom gavel slams. Some endings are slow, quiet things. They settle in like fog, cold, patient, and inescapable. After that last meeting with Kristen, I expected to feel lighter. Vindicated, maybe. But what I felt was something entirely different. Vacant. Not hollow in a sad, broken kind of way, just cleared out. As if the parts of me that had been twisted by her lies had finally been removed, and all that remained was the space left behind. Angela noticed it first. "You seem calm," she said one morning while we sat in her kitchen, coffee cups between us and the sound of birds outside like background vocals to our silent contemplation. "I'm done," I said. Not angry, not mourning, just done. She nodded. "So what now?" That was the question, wasn't it? Kristen was under investigation. The IRS had frozen accounts linked to the fraudulent companies. Marshall had vanished. Rumor had it he fled to Florida, the classic coward's retreat. Dolores had sold her house, likely to cover the HOA fines and legal bills. As for Ray, well, he stopped sending birthday cards. Probably best for both of us. I thought about selling the house, the one Kristen and I had lived in. But I didn't. Instead, I gutted it. Took a sledgehammer to the bathroom she insisted we'd remodel when the time was right. Tore out the floral wallpaper she picked. Ripped up the carpet that still held the scent of a marriage that was never real. Angela helped. She wielded a crowbar like a woman scorned by proxy. "I've never been married," she said, prying tiles from the kitchen floor. "But this feels therapeutic." We laughed. And for the first time in a long time, it wasn't bitter laughter. It was spring when the final pieces fell into place. The court ruled in my favor. Kristen's appeal failed. She was now legally liable for restitution and barred from any future claims against me or my estate. I watched the judge deliver the decision and felt no triumph, only clarity. Outside the courthouse, I didn't wait to see her reaction. Instead, I drove upstate to a cabin my father left me in his will. I hadn't been there in over a decade. It was old, creaky, smelled like cedar and history. I spent 2 nights there, alone, just listening to wind and rain and firewood crackle. I brought one photo with me. Not of Kristen, not of us. It was me and my father, taken when I was 6. We're standing beside the old truck he taught me to drive in. He's got his arm around me, sun in our eyes. It's the kind of picture you don't just look at. You remember the air, the warmth, the safety. I kept it on the windowsill as I wrote a letter. Not to Kristen, to myself. I wrote everything I needed to let go of. The guilt for not seeing it sooner, the shame of believing her lies, the anger I'd carried too long. I burned the letter in the fireplace, watched the flames erase the last of her from my soul. When I returned to the city, I did something unexpected. I registered for a creative writing class. Angela encouraged it. Said I had a story. I wasn't sure I wanted to share it. But she reminded me, stories aren't always for other people. Sometimes they're how we make sense of what we've survived. So I wrote. At first, it was just fragments, scenes from the delivery room, the courtroom, the shoebox. Then it became a narrative, then a manuscript. The class loved it. "Truth reads better than fiction," one guy said. "I hated your ex-wife," another added. But I couldn't stop reading. One night, after a class, Angela and I sat on the back porch. She'd read the final draft. "You left a lot out," she said softly. "I wrote what mattered." She turned to me. "You think you'll ever trust again?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked at her, really looked. This woman who never asked for anything, but always gave everything. Who saw me at my lowest and never flinched. Who challenged me, laughed with me, built new memories on top of scorched earth. "I already do," I said. And I meant it. We didn't fall in love like in the movies. No grand kiss in the rain. No dramatic declarations. Just 2 people choosing each other, day by day, with no illusions. No secrets. And that was better than any fantasy Kristen ever tried to fabricate. Because this wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about finally living without it.